Get it together, Maya, or you're out. Greg Thompson's voice sliced through the conference room like a blade, his eyes narrowing on Maya Johnson. The black woman, mid-40s, stood frozen, her fingers gripping a stack of reports. Her jaw clenched, teeth grinding so hard her temples throbbed. Greg, the smug quality control manager, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his smirk daring her to respond. The room, packed with a dozen co-workers at Quantum Innovations in Silicon Valley, fell silent. All eyes darted between the two, tension thick as tar. Maya's chest tightened, but her face stayed stone cold. She wasn't just any employee. She was the CEO, the genius who'd built this tech empire from a garage startup. But nobody knew, not Greg, not the team. She'd disguised herself as a low-level staffer to sniff out rot in her company's culture. And rot she found. Greg, 50, white, with a comb-overs and a chip on his shoulder, oozed contempt. He'd been gunning for her since day one, his critiques laced with venom. "Your report's a mess," he snapped, cutting her off before she could speak. "Sloppy work doesn't cut it here. You don't belong in tech." The words hit like a fist. Maya's pulse hammered, but she swallowed the fire in her throat. She'd heard worse. Decades of slights in boardrooms, pitch meetings, and coding boot camps, where she was the only black woman. Her mind flashed to her first investor pitch at 25, when a suit sneered, "Stick to something simpler." She'd proved them wrong then, and she'd do it again. But not yet. Her eyes flicked to the team. Some squirmed, others stared at their laptops, avoiding the scene. Cowards, she thought, but she didn't blame them. Greg's power trip was a daily ritual, and minorities bore the brunt. Greg wasn't done. He snatched her report, tossing it onto the table like garbage. "Redo it by tomorrow, or you're gone," he barked, cutting off her attempt to explain. "No excuses. You're not cut out for this." The room held its breath. Maya's knuckles whitened, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to scream that she'd coded the software they were all profiting from, that her vision had put Quantum on the map, but she bit her tongue. Timing was everything. She let Greg dig his own grave. A co-worker, Lisa Carter, a 42-year-old white single mom, shifted uncomfortably. Her eyes met Maya's, flashing sympathy. Lisa had seen Greg's pattern, praising white staff for mediocre work while nitpicking every move of black and Latino employees. She wanted to speak up, but fear of Greg's wrath kept her quiet. Maya caught the look and gave a subtle nod, a silent promise. "I've got this." Lisa's shoulders relaxed, but her fists stayed balled. Greg leaned forward, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "You think you can skate by here? This isn't charity." The jab was a dog whistle, and Maya heard it loud and clear. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from a cold, calculated fury. She'd spent years proving her worth, from late nights coding to outsmarting venture capitalists who underestimated her. This wasn't just about her. It was about every employee Greg had belittled. Every dream he'd tried to crush. She straightened, her voice steady as steel. "I'll have the report ready, Mr. Thompson." No groveling, no weakness, just a promise laced with defiance. The meeting ended, but the air crackled with unresolved rage. Greg strutted out, oblivious to the storm he'd ignited. Maya lingered, her fingers brushing a small photo in her pocket, a snapshot of her at a tech conference, shaking hands with industry legends. It was a reminder of who she was, and who Greg would soon learn she was. Her lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. He'd crossed the line, and she was done playing small. The fuse was lit. Maya Johnson's heels clicked against the polished floor as she exited the conference room, her spine rigid, her face a mask of calm. Greg Thompson's words, "You don't belong in tech," burned in her ears like acid. Her fists clenched, nails biting into her palms, drawing pinpricks of pain. She wanted to spin around, storm back, and shove the truth in his smug face. "I built this company, you fool!" But she didn't. Not yet. Her heart thundered, a storm of rage and hurt churning inside, but Maya was a strategist. She'd learned long ago that timing was her sharpest weapon. For now, she'd let Greg think he'd won. In the break room, she poured coffee, her hands steady despite the fire in her chest. The hum of Silicon Valley's quantum innovations buzzed around her, co-workers typing, phones pinging, but the world felt muted, like she was underwater. She was 45, a black woman who'd clawed her way to the top in a tech industry that rarely gave her kind a seat at the table. She'd faced sneers, dismissals, and closed doors, yet she'd coded the AI that powered this company's success. Now posing as a low-level employee to root out toxicity, she was swallowing the same poison she'd fought her whole life. Greg's jab wasn't just personal, it was a slap at every black employee he'd demeaned. Her eyes stung, but she blinked hard, refusing tears. Crying was for later, in private, where no one could twist her pain into weakness. She sipped the coffee, its bitterness matching her mood. Memories surged. Her first pitch at 25 when a white investor laughed. A black girl coding? Good luck. She'd turned that laughter into a multi-million-dollar empire. Greg's contempt was nothing new, but it cut deeper because this was her company, her vision, her legacy, and he was trampling it with his bigotry. Lisa Carter, the coworker who'd caught Maya's eye in the meeting, slipped into the break room. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy bun, her face etched with worry. "Maya, that was wrong," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "Greg's out of control. I wanted to say something, but—" Her voice cracked, guilt heavy in her blue eyes. Lisa, 42, a single mom scraping by, couldn't risk her job. Maya understood. She'd seen fear silence good people before. "It's okay, Lisa," Maya said, her voice low but firm. "This isn't your fight." But her eyes said otherwise. "It's mine." Lisa hesitated, clutching her mug. He's been like this forever. Last month, he passed over Jamal for a promotion, gave it to some rookie with half the skills. It's not right. Maya nodded, her jaw tightening. Jamal, a black engineer, was one of many Greg had sidelined. She'd been watching, documenting, waiting. Lisa's words were a spark, fueling her resolve. "He'll answer for it," Maya said, her tone sharp as a blade. Lisa's eyes widened, sensing something deeper in Maya's calm, but she didn't press. Alone again, Maya leaned against the counter, her fingers tracing the photo in her pocket. Her younger self beaming at a tech conference, surrounded by mentors who believed in her. That girl had fought for every inch, and the woman she'd become wasn't about to let Greg's prejudice taint her company. Her anger hardened into purpose. She wasn't just hurt, she was done playing small. Greg's words had sliced open old wounds, but they'd also sharpened her focus. She'd let him strut a little longer, piling up his mistakes. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was a coiled spring, ready to snap. As she walked back to her desk, a coworker whispered, "You okay, Maya?" She flashed a tight smile, her eyes glinting with defiance. Never better. Her voice carried a promise, a quiet vow that Greg's reign was on borrowed time. In her mind she saw the boardroom, the moment she'd drop the mask and reveal her truth. The thought sent a thrill through her veins. The storm was coming, and Greg wouldn't see it until it hit. "Pack your things, Maya. You're done." Greg Thompson's voice cut through the silence of the quality control team's office like a guillotine. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his face twisted with smug triumph. Maya Johnson, her fingers frozen on her keyboard, felt her pulse spike, a roar of blood in her ears. The room, a sterile cube in Quantum Innovations' Silicon Valley headquarters, seemed to shrink, the air heavy with the weight of Greg's words. Her coworkers' heads snapped up, eyes wide, but no one spoke. Greg's power trip was a one-man show, and Maya was the target. Her jaw locked, teeth grinding until her temples ached. She was 45, the black woman who'd built this tech giant from a single laptop in a cramped apartment, now reduced to a punching bag for Greg's bigotry. She'd been incognito for weeks, posing as a low-level employee to expose cracks in her company's culture. But this was the line. Greg's warning from the meeting had morphed into a public execution. "Your performance is a liability," he sneered, cutting off her attempt to respond. "You're fired. Out by noon." His words dripped with venom, each syllable a jab at her race, her presence, her existence in his world. Maya's chest burned, her hands trembling as she gripped her desk. She wanted to lunge, to scream that she was the CEO, the mind behind the AI that made Quantum a fortune. But she didn't. Her eyes flicked to the team. Some averted their gazes. Others stared in shock. Lisa Carter, the single mom who'd whispered support in the break room, gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Maya caught her eye, a silent plea. Not now. Lisa's fists clenched, but she stayed quiet, trapped by the same fear that silenced the rest. Greg wasn't done. He stepped closer, his voice a low hiss. You thought you could coast here? This isn't your place. The dog whistle was deafening. Your place meant, not with us, not in tech, not in power. Maya's blood boiled, memories flooding back, the venture capitalist who'd scoffed at her pitch, the professor who'd told her to stick to support roles. She'd buried those slights, turned them into fuel to build an empire, but this was her empire, and Greg was torching it with every word. Her fingers brushed the photo in her pocket, her younger self at a tech conference shaking hands with giants. That girl had fought. This woman would end this. She stood, her chair scraping the floor, the sound slicing through the tension. You're making a mistake, Mr. Thompson, she said, her voice cold as steel, each word deliberate. Greg smirked, waving her off. No mistake, get out. He turned, strutting away, certain he'd crushed her. But Maya's eyes blazed, her calm a facade for the inferno inside. She wasn't broken, she was ignited. This wasn't just about her, it was about Jamal, passed over for promotion, about Maria, the Latina coder Greg mocked, about every employee he'd diminished. She'd let him think he'd won, but his rope was running out. Maya grabbed her bag, her movements sharp, purposeful. She pulled out the photo, her thumb tracing the frame. It wasn't just a memory, it was evidence of her legacy, a reminder of the empire she'd built against all odds. She slipped it back, her lips curling into a dangerous smile. Greg had just lit the fuse. She'd been gathering evidence, emails, complaints, recordings of his bias. Now she'd weaponize it. Her next move wasn't revenge, it was justice. She'd end his reign in the boardroom, where the truth of her identity would hit like a sledgehammer. As she walked out, Lisa rushed over, whispering, Maya, this isn't right, what can I do? Maya paused, her gaze fierce. Stay sharp, Lisa, you'll see. Her voice was a promise, a spark in the dark. She stepped into the hallway, her heels echoing like a war drum. Greg's office light glowed at the end of the corridor, a beacon of his arrogance. Maya's heart pounded with purpose. The storm was brewing, and she'd bring it down. Maya Johnson stepped into the glass-walled boardroom of Quantum Innovations, her heart pounding like a war drum. The Silicon Valley skyline loomed outside, but her focus was razor-sharp, locked on the suits around the mahogany table. She was still Maya the quality control grunt, her badge clipped to her blazer, her true identity as CEO a tightly guarded secret. Greg Thompson's firing had lit a fuse, and now she was here, invited as an observer to a high-stakes meeting about the company's future. Her hands gripped her notepad, knuckles whitening, but her face was a mask of calm. She wasn't here to take notes. She was here to set the stage. The boardroom buzzed with tension. Execs debated budgets, their voices sharp, egos sharper. Maya sat quietly, her pen scratching quick observations. Who spoke over whom, who dodged accountability. She'd spent weeks undercover, exposing the rot Greg had nurtured. Now she was stepping into a new arena, one where her vision for a fair, innovative company could either thrive or die. Her jaw tightened, teeth grinding as she recalled Greg's sneer. You don't belong in tech. The memory was a blade, but it only honed her resolve. She'd built Quantum from nothing. Coding through nights, outsmarting skeptics who saw only her black skin, not her genius. This was her empire, and she'd reclaim it. A senior VP droning about cost-cutting fumbled a tech term. Maya's pen paused. Without thinking, she spoke, her voice clear, cutting through the noise. That algorithm's efficiency isn't the issue, it's the deployment pipeline. Streamline the API calls, and you'll save millions. The room froze. Heads turned, eyes narrowing on the nobody in the corner. Her pulse spiked, but she held their gazes, unflinching. The VP stammered, "Who are you again?" Maya smiled thinly. "Just an observer." But her words carried weight, a glimpse of the mind that had birthed Quantum's AI core. Whispers rippled. A board member, Dr. Alan Brooks, leaned forward, his silver hair catching the light. His eyes locked on Maya, a flicker of recognition sparking. She knew him. Her mentor from a 90S tech conference, back when she was a broke coder with big dreams. She'd helped him debug a prototype, a favor he'd never forgotten. Her stomach twisted, but she kept her cool. This wasn't the moment to reveal herself. Not yet. She needed more evidence? Allies? The perfect strike. Her fingers brushed the photo in her pocket, the one of her younger self shaking hands with industry titans. That girl had fought for every inch. This woman was ready to claim the whole battlefield. Flashbacks hit hard. Maya, 25, pitching to a room of white investors who smirked at her ambition. She'd code through their doubts, launching Quantum's first app from a dingy apartment. By 30, she was a legend, but the industry still whispered, she's lucky, not talented. She'd gone undercover to protect her company's soul, to ensure it didn't become another tech bro cesspool. Greg's firing was personal, but this was bigger, a mission to root out every trace of his poison. Her eyes scanned the room, noting who nodded at her comment, who scoffed. She was mapping allies and enemies, her mind a chessboard. A junior exec, emboldened by her input, asked, "Got more ideas like that?" Maya's lips curved, a spark of defiance in her gaze. "Plenty." The room shifted, curiosity replacing skepticism. She felt the tide turning, her competence cracking their assumptions, but she stayed humble, her voice steady, her posture unassuming. Let them underestimate her a little longer. Greg's downfall was just the start. She was here to dismantle his legacy of bias, to prove value wasn't skin deep. Her pen resumed its scratching, each word a step toward her endgame. As the meeting adjourned, Alan lingered, his gaze lingering on her. "You remind me of someone," he said, his voice low. Maya's heart skipped, but she only nodded, slipping out. In the hallway, her fingers tightened on the photo, her past whispering, "You're ready." The boardroom had been her first move. The next would shake the company to its core. Maya Johnson slipped out of the boardroom, her pulse still racing from her bold comment. The Silicon Valley air outside Quantum Innovations headquarters felt charged, like the calm before a lightning strike. Her fingers grazed the photo in her pocket. Her younger self, shaking hands at a tech conference. A reminder of the battles she'd won to build this company. She'd just planted a seed in the boardroom, her sharp insight turning heads. Now she needed allies to make her move. Greg Thompson's firing was a spark. She was about to ignite a wildfire. As she crossed the sleek lobby, a voice stopped her cold. "Maya Johnson!" Dr. Alan Brooks, the silverhead board member, stood by the coffee bar, his eyes wide with recognition. Her stomach lurched. Alan, 55, was no suit. He was a tech pioneer, a man who'd mentored her 2 decades ago when she was just a hungry coder. His kind face, lined with years of wisdom, broke into a grin. "It is you, the genius who saved my prototype in '98. Maya's jaw tightened, her heart pounding. She wasn't ready to drop her mask, but Alan's voice was a crack in her armor. She forced a smile, her voice steady. "Good to see you, Dr. Brooks." But her eyes darted, scanning for eavesdroppers. Alan stepped closer, his tone dropping. "What's a legend like you doing playing grunt work? I saw that API call fix you dropped in there. Classic Maya." Her chest tightened, a mix of pride and panic. She'd helped Alan debug a failing project at a conference years ago, a favor that launched his career. Now he was a board member at her company and he was piecing it together. She needed to steer this fast. "I'm just here to observe," she said, her words clipped, deflecting. But Alan wasn't buying it. He leaned in, voice low. "You're up to something. I know that look. You had it when you outsmarted those MIT hotshots." Her lips twitched, a flicker of amusement breaking through. Alan was sharp, always had been. She trusted him, but trust was a risk. Greg's allies could be anywhere waiting to pounce. Still, Alan's recognition was a lifeline. She needed someone in her corner when the truth came out. Lisa Carter, The coworker who'd whispered support after Greg's attack appeared, clutching a stack of files. Her blue eyes flicked between Maya and Alan, sensing the weight of the moment. "Maya, you okay?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. Maya nodded, but Lisa wasn't done. "I heard what you said in there. That was incredible. Greg would have lost it." Her words were a spark, reigniting Maya's fire. Lisa's loyalty, born from seeing Greg's cruelty, was real. Maya seized the moment, her voice low, fierce. "Stick with me, Lisa. You'll see why I'm here." Alan's eyes narrowed, connecting dots. "You're not just observing, are you? You've got skin in this game." Maya's pulse spiked, but she held his gaze, her silence a weapon. She couldn't reveal she was the CEO, not yet. But Alan's recognition was the first twist, a crack in the facade Greg had exploited. "Let's just say I'm fixing what's broken," she said, her tone sharp as a blade. Lisa's jaw dropped, sensing the depth behind Maya's words. Alan nodded, a knowing glint in his eye. "Whatever you're planning, I'm in." The trio stood in the lobby, an unspoken alliance forming. Maya's mind raced, mapping her next move. Alan's recognition wasn't just validation, it was power. He'd be her voice in the boardroom when she dropped the bomb. Lisa's support, raw and unpolished, was the heart of the team she'd protect. Greg's shadow still loomed, his allies whispering in corners. But Maya felt the tide turning. Her fingers tightened on the photo, her past roaring to life. She wasn't just a coder or a CEO, she was a force. And her allies were ready. As they parted, Alan called after her. "Don't keep us waiting, Maya." Her smile was a promise, sharp and dangerous. The boardroom had been her opening salvo. Now, with allies in place, she was ready to strike. Greg's world was about to shatter. Maya Johnson stood at the edge of the Quantum Innovations boardroom, her heart hammering like a piston. The room buzzed with tension, executives and staff packed in for an emergency meeting called by Greg Thompson to address performance issues. Greg sat at the head of the table, his smirk sharp as a razor, ready to cement his victory after firing Maya. She'd been silent too long, her CEO identity buried under the guise of a low-level employee. Now, with Alan Brooks and Lisa Carter in her corner, the moment had come. Her fingers brushed the photo in her pocket. Her younger self, a black woman, defying a whitewashed tech world. Greg's reign ended today. The room hushed as Greg stood, his voice dripping with arrogance. "We're here to fix this team's failures," he snapped, his eyes skimming past Maya like she was invisible. "Some people don't belong in high-stakes tech." The jab was aimed at her, a final twist of the knife. Maya's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding so hard her head throbbed. She'd built Quantum from a single line of code, outsmarting every skeptic who'd sneered at her race, her gender. Greg's words were fuel, and she was ready to burn. She stepped forward, her heels clicking like gunfire on the polished floor. "Enough," she said, her voice slicing through the room. All eyes snapped to her. Greg's smirk faltered, his hand cutting the air to interrupt. "You're out of line, Maya. You're fired. Leave." But she didn't flinch. Her gaze locked on his, cold and unyielding. "You don't get to decide that, Greg." Her words were a blade, sharp and final. Murmurs rippled through the room. Lisa, seated near the back, leaned forward, her fists clenched with anticipation. Alan at the board table nodded subtly, his eyes glinting with trust. Maya pulled a tablet from her bag, her movements deliberate. "I'm not just an employee," she said, her voice rising, each word a hammer. She tapped the screen, projecting legal documents onto the wall, her name bolded as founder and sole owner of Quantum Innovations. Gasps erupted. Greg's face drained of color, his mouth opening to protest, but Maya cut him off. "I'm the CEO. I built this company. Every algorithm, every patent, every dollar. It's mine." The room exploded in whispers, head swiveling between her and Greg. His knees buckled, but he caught the table, his eyes wild with denial. She didn't stop. "This company stands for innovation, not prejudice," she declared, her voice a thunderclap. "But you, Greg, poisoned it. You judged me, judged others, by skin, not skill." She gestured to Lisa, who stood, holding a folder of complaints from minority staff, evidence of Greg's bias. Maya's eyes swept the room, locking on every face. I went undercover to see the truth, and the truth is we're better than this. Her words weren't just a takedown, they were a call to arms, a vision for a company where value trumped hate. Her grand declaration came next, a vow that shook the room. Starting today, Quantum launches a diversity initiative, mandatory training, fair promotions, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. She paused, her gaze piercing Greg. Value isn't in titles or skin, it's in what you build, who you lift up. The room erupted in applause, led by Alan and Lisa. Employees who'd cowered under Greg now stood, their faces alight with hope. Maya's heart swelled, not with pride, but purpose. This wasn't about her. It was about the Jamals, the Marias, the silenced dreamers she'd fought for. Greg stammered, his voice a weak croak. This is a lie. But the documents were ironclad, and the room had turned. Maya's lips curved, not a smile, but a warning. You're done here, Greg. Her words were final, a guillotine dropping. The board nodded, Alan rising to back her. The truth was out, and Greg's world was crumbling. Maya stood tall, her photo a silent anchor in her pocket. She'd reclaimed her company, but the real fight was just beginning. Greg Thompson's face twisted, a mask of desperation as he slammed his fist on the boardroom table. This is a setup, he roared, his voice cracking like thin ice. The room at Quantum Innovations' Silicon Valley headquarters was a powder keg, still reeling from Maya Johnson's bombshell. She was the CEO, the black woman he'd fired, the genius who'd built the company he'd poisoned with his bigotry. Maya stood tall, her eyes locked on Greg, her calm a steel blade. Her fingers twitched, itching to clutch the photo in her pocket. Her younger self, defying a world that underestimated her. Greg's outburst was his last stand, and she was ready to end it. You can't just waltz in and claim you're the boss, Greg spat, his comb-over slipping as he jabbed a finger at her. His allies, two mid-level managers who'd thrived under his bias, nodded, their eyes darting nervously. The accusation was a dagger aimed at Maya's credibility, a desperate bid to claw back power. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with the cold fury of a woman who'd fought this fight before. She had faced rooms of skeptics who saw only her black skin, not her code, her vision, her empire. Greg's attack was a risk. She was exposed, her identity public. One wrong move, and her authority could falter. You want proof? Maya's voice cut through his tirade, sharp as a whip. She nodded to Dr. Alan Brooks, the board member, who'd recognized her genius from a decades-old favor. Alan rose, his silver hair catching the light, and slid a stack of documents across the table. Articles of incorporation, patent filings, all bearing Maya's name. Greg's eyes widened, his breath hitching, but he doubled down. Forged! She's a fraud, he shouted, cutting off Alan's attempt to speak. His allies murmured support, spreading doubt like venom. Maya's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding until her temples throbbed. This wasn't just about her. It was about every employee Greg had crushed, every dream he'd dismissed. Lisa Carter, the single mom who'd pledged loyalty, stood trembling, clutching a flash drive. I've got proof too, she said, her voice shaky but fierce. She plugged it into the projector, displaying emails. Greg's orders to sideline minority staff, his snide remarks about diversity hires. The room gasped, head swiveling to Greg, his face turned ashen, his hands shaking as he tried to interrupt. That's out of context, he barked, but Lisa cut him off, her eyes blazing. You told Jamal he'd never make lead because he didn't fit the culture. You did this. The accusation landed like a grenade, shattering Greg's facade. Maya seized the moment, her voice a thunderclap. You built a culture of fear, Greg. You judged us by skin, not skill. Her words weren't just for him. They were for the room, for the employees who'd cowered, for the 50-plus audience watching this unfold on YouTube, hungry for justice. The board shifted, their faces hardening against Greg. Alan spoke, his tone ice-cold. We've seen enough. This ends now. But Greg lunged forward, his voice a snarl. You'll regret this, Maya. I'll sue. I'll ruin you. The The threat was a gamble, risking Maya's reputation just as she reclaimed her throne. Her pulse spiked, but she didn't flinch. She'd faced worse. Investors who'd laughed, banks that had denied her loans, all because she was a black woman in tech. She leaned forward, her gaze ablade. "Try it, Greg. You'll lose." The room held its breath, the air crackling with her authority. Lisa stepped closer, her hand brushing Maya's arm, a silent vow of support. Alan nodded, signaling the board's backing. Greg's allies shrank back, their loyalty crumbling. The risk was real. Maya's revelation had made her a target, but her allies were her shield. As Greg stormed toward the door, his parting shot echoed, "This isn't over!" But Maya's eyes glinted, her lips curving with defiance. She'd faced giants and won. Greg was no giant, just a man about to fall. The boardroom door slammed, but the sound was drowned by the fire in her heart. The final showdown was coming, and she'd be ready. The boardroom at Quantum Innovations crackled with raw energy, a storm ready to break. Maya Johnson stood center stage, her presence a towering force, her CEO identity now a blazing truth. Greg Thompson, his face a sickly shade of gray, gripped the edge of the table, his comb-overs limp, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. The Silicon Valley air outside was calm, but inside, it was war. Maya's revelation had shattered Greg's world. She was the founder, the black woman he'd fired, the genius he'd dared to call unfit for tech. Now, with Alan Brooks and Lisa Carter flanking her, she was ready to bury his reign of prejudice for good. "You thought you could silence me," Maya said, her voice a blade, slicing through the room's tension. "You thought you could judge me by my skin and win." Greg opened his mouth, but she cut him off, her words sharp as gunfire. "You're done." She nodded to Lisa, who, with trembling hands, clicked the projector. A video played, grainy footage from a break-room camera, capturing Greg's sneering voice. "Maya doesn't belong here. Neither do the others like her." Gasps erupted, employees exchanging stunned glances. The evidence was a guillotine, and Greg's neck was on the block. Lisa stepped forward, her voice steady now, fueled by weeks of watching Greg's cruelty. "You didn't just target Maya," she said, her eyes locked on him. "You passed over Jamal, mocked Maria, and made us all feel small." She held up a stack of printed emails, each one a nail in Greg's coffin. Orders to undermine minority staff, snide comments about keeping standards. The room roared with murmurs, the tide turning hard. Alan Brooks, the board member who'd recognized Maya's genius, stood, his voice ice-cold. "This ends today, Thompson. You're fired." Greg's knees buckled, his hands clawing the table. "You can't do this!" he roared, his voice a desperate rasp. But Maya wasn't done. She strode forward, her heels clicking like a countdown. "You're not just fired, Greg. You're exposed." She gestured to the screen, now showing Quantum's social media feed, where Lisa had just posted the video with the caption, "No room for prejudice at Quantum." The post was exploding. Likes, shares, comments from employees and clients, all calling for justice. Greg's name was now a hashtag, his reputation ash. The board acted fast, their faces grim. "Security, escort Mr. Thompson out," Alan ordered. 2 guards appeared, their steps heavy. Greg lunged toward Maya, his finger jabbing, "You'll pay for this." But her gaze didn't waver, her eyes burning with the fire of a woman who'd fought bigger battles. "No, Greg, you will." The guards grabbed his arms, his protest drowned by the room's applause. Employees stood, clapping, some cheering, their fear replaced by defiance. Lisa's eyes shone with tears, her fist raised in solidarity. Alan nodded, a proud mentor watching his protege reclaim her throne. Maya raised a hand, silencing the room. "This isn't about me," she said, her voice a clarion call. "It's about us, all of us, who've been judged, dismissed, or silenced. Quantum is bigger than one man's hate." The applause surged again, louder, fiercer. Greg dragged toward the door, turned for one last plea. "I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean it." But his words were hollow, swallowed by the room's roar. Maya's lips curved. not in triumph but in resolve. "You'll apologize to the world, Greg." "Start typing." As the doors slammed shut behind him, the room felt lighter, cleansed. Maya stood tall, her photo, a young black coder shaking hands with legends, still in her pocket, a silent witness to her journey. She'd exposed Greg, not for revenge, but for justice. The employees' cheers echoed, a testament to her victory, but her eyes were on the future, on the policies she'd rewrite, the culture she'd rebuild. Greg's fall was just the beginning. The real work, lifting others up, was next. Maya Johnson stood at the window of Quantum Innovations' Silicon Valley headquarters, the city's skyline sprawling below like a promise kept. The boardroom showdown was over, Greg Thompson's bigotry exposed, his career in ashes. The air still buzzed with the employees' cheers, their applause a thunderclap for justice. Maya's heart pounded, not with triumph, but with purpose. Her fingers clutched the photo in her pocket, her younger self, a black coder shaking hands with tech giants, defying a world that told her she didn't belong. She'd reclaimed her company, but this wasn't the end. It was a beginning. The room behind her hummed with new energy. Employees, once silenced by Greg's reign, now spoke freely, their faces alight with hope. Maya turned, her gaze sweeping over them. Jamal, the black engineer, passed over for promotion. Maria, the Latina coder, mocked for her accent. Lisa Carter, the single mom who'd risked everything to stand with her. They weren't just staff, they were her legacy, the reason she'd gone undercover as a low-level employee to root out Raw. Her jaw tightened, teeth grinding as she recalled Greg's sneer, "You don't belong in tech." She'd proved him wrong, not just for herself, but for every dreamer he'd tried to crush. She stepped to the center of the room, her voice clear, commanding. "Quantum isn't just code or profits," she said, her words slicing through the chatter. "It's people, it's value, it's us." The room stilled, every eye on her. She wasn't just the CEO, she was a symbol, a black woman who'd built an empire against all odds. "We're launching a scholarship today," she declared, her tone a vow, "for underrepresented coders, black, Latino, Native, anyone told they don't belong. We'll fund their dreams, just like mine were." Applause erupted, fierce and unyielding, a wave of belief in her vision. Lisa stepped forward, her eyes shining. "I'm in, Maya," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I'll mentor the first class." Her words were a spark, igniting nods from others. Jamal raised a hand, his voice bold. "Count me in too." Maria followed, her accent proud, unshamed. "I'll teach coding workshops." The room pulsed with commitment, a chain reaction of hope. Maya's chest swelled, her heart racing. This was what she'd fought for. Not just Greg's downfall, but a culture where everyone could rise. Dr. Alan Brooks, her mentor from decades past, approached, his silver hair glinting. "You've changed the game, Maya," he said, his voice thick with pride. "The board's behind you. New policies, training, the works." He handed her a draft proposal, outlining diversity reforms inspired by her stand. Maya nodded, her lips curving into a fierce smile. This is just the start. She wasn't here to rest. She was here to rebuild, to ensure Quantum's soul matched its success. Her fingers tightened on the photo, a silent oath to her younger self. We made it. The company's social media lit up, the video of Greg's exposure now viral, tagged with "Quantum for All." Clients and competitors alike praised Maya's leadership, her story spreading like wildfire. She'd turned pain into power, not for revenge, but for progress. The scholarship, named after her first mentor, would fund a new generation, proving value wasn't in skin or status, but in courage and contribution. Her eyes flicked to the skyline, a horizon of possibility. She'd faced giants, investors, skeptics, Greg, and won. Now she'd lift others to do the same. As the room emptied, Maya lingered, her gaze on the photo now in her hand. "You did good," she whispered to her younger self, the coder who'd dreamed big. She tucked it away, her steps firm as she headed to her office. The CEO's office, no longer a secret. The door closed, but the echo of her words lingered. True value shines through. For the 50-plus audience watching on YouTube, her story was a beacon. Justice won, Hope kindled, a legacy born. Quantum would never be the same, and neither would they.